I don't know if you saw much of the address at the UN by President Trump. We showed a bit of it. He sort of smack talked everybody in the General Assembly, talking about how the UN's been a profound disappointment, how he's ended 7 wars without any help from the UN. And he talked about one of the greatest threats to the world being alternative energy. It was a weird sort of a riff-filled speech that is, he's kind of off-prompter for a while and doing his thing. Maybe some comments on that, and then I'm going to get to the Justice Department and what's happening there.
Well, maybe we could take up a collection to send Donald to get a Dale Carnegie course in how to win friends and influence people.
He sure didn't follow his that which he claims is, his method of business, right? Which is, making a deal, and he essentially alienated everybody in that room, which is what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, this actually is Donald's way of doing stuff, insulting people, telling him that he's the only person, who can do anything. I mean, when I've been telling you for years that Donald believes he should be the world dictator, this is just like the perfect proof of exactly that. That Donald has this idea that he is special and unique and the rest of us are idiots. And of course, it's absurd on its face. But his attack on the UN and his saying that, he solved 7 wars. The other day, he cited one of these wars. He named 2 countries where he said he adjusted their border. The countries are hundreds of miles apart. I mean, he doesn't even, he says he settled the Pakistan-India conflict. Well, the Pakistanis are like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because Donald gave them economic favors. And the Indians, Modi on down, and I appear on TV in India a couple times a week, are like, what are you talking about, dude? You never even made a phone call. So Donald just lives in this fictional world. And unfortunately, we're the victims of his narrative, which is getting more and more incoherent as we move along. But also, he's really getting drunk with power. I had lunch today, Mark, with a retired FBI agent who told me a couple of things I didn't know that may be in the public record. 23% of FBI agents have been pulled off their assignments: counterterrorism, gun trafficking, gun running, money laundering, human trafficking, to work on ICE arrests of people. And that puts the country at severe risk, both from criminal conduct and national security conduct. And, FBI agents follow a motto: fidelity, bravery, integrity. Working with ICE and wearing masks over your face, that doesn't fit any of that. And I'm sure there are many more who would leave right now, except, you got 2 kids, they're in college, you got a mortgage, you're 3 years from being eligible to take your pension. And apparently there's a lot of discussion, my friend tells me, going on inside the FBI that Trump eventually plans to cancel or get rid of pensions and possibly health insurance for federal employees. There have been some hints of this, and apparently it's being taken seriously by my friend, the former FBI agent, tells me, inside the FBI.
Well, I mean, it's the FBI, and then it extends to other parts of the Justice Department, right? The Justice Department being completely weaponized. They're out of the weeds on this, and now it's quite openly discussed by Trump. Go after these people. And
right. And the purpose, Mark, of this is not to convict James Comey or Hillary Clinton or any of these people of a crime. It is exactly what Trump's Minister of Hate, Stephen Miller, said the other day. And the order in which he said things before he gets the word law is important. He said, we're going to take their jobs, we're going to take their money, and then we're going to use the law against them. And what they want to do is force these people to spend the lifetime they've spent building up resources and ruin their economic lives.
And I'm seeing that more and more people at the Justice Department are uneasy about remaining there and uneasy about the bluntness of his threats. And there's more and more reporting that, people are beginning to look for work elsewhere. These are oftentimes public servants. You've made this point before, I think, that, these aren't particularly well-paying jobs. These are people who are drawn to public service oftentimes as prosecutors there at the Justice Department and others who work in government.
Yeah, almost any position in the government requiring the kind of education that until now the FBI is required. They're lowering the standards for FBI agents. But almost all FBI agents are lawyers. Justice Department prosecutors are lawyers, and Justice Department civil lawyers as well. And almost all of them could go to private practice and make more money unless there's a flood of thousands of them. And then, of course, that doesn't work. But people don't go to these jobs to get rich. And that's something Trump doesn't understand. Donald, who never did a day of public service before January 20th, 2017, not one day of public service. He has no concept of this, no idea of decency and of dedication, of risking your life. I mean, what does he say about soldiers who get killed or get captured? You know, they're losers. And what I find troubling is we have yet to reach the point where Republicans, especially in the Senate, find a backbone. How bad does this have to get? And one of the things I asked at lunch today was, I said, Pete Hegseth announced that we are no longer trying to prevent the Russians from breaking into Pentagon computers. And I said, my assumption would be if any other administration was in power and a defense secretary said that, they would have FBI agents sitting him down in a room. And by the time they were done talking to him, a U.S. attorney would have said, put him in handcuffs. And the answer I got to that was absolutely.
And give me the problematic nature of what Hegseth said.
Hegseth has said we're no longer going to try and interdict Russian.
We're not going to try to interdict it. I see. I assume that
every day there are thousands and tens of thousands of efforts to break into computers, whether it's Citibank or Disney or the Pentagon or the State Department. And Hegseth declared that we're no longer going to try and stop this by the Russians. And
it's funny.
What?
I heard that as there isn't any more of this. That's why there are no interdictions. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's not what he intended. Look,
only in Happy Go Magic Land.
Yeah, the Hegseth thing is just so full of incompetence. He's viewed as an incompetent by many at to DOD, as you know. And, there's all this performative stuff, changing the name, and then him showing up on television and then alongside Trump in all of these different places. So I feel as though, in a way, he's a prop. But on the other hand, he's in charge of, the biggest governmental agency in Washington, although maybe Homeland Security is now bigger.
Homeland Security is now bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Without a question. But, the cover story the Atlantic magazine did some months ago that showed a horse-drawn hearse and Washington, D.C. burned to the ground is just, that was spot on. And it's more and more becoming very clear that, in fact, the Trump people intend to destroy the federal government as we've known it. They have been busy handing out pardons to major league drug traffickers, gun runners, money launderers, sexual predators, who they or their family or their associates have in one way or another put money in Donald's pocket. It may not be his personal pocket. It could be his library for someday or wherever he chooses. But, we have a president who has criminalized the presidency.
The criminality is actually something I would be okay with if there were any competence about the rest of the administration. And I say okay with, it's like, okay, I get it. The guy's corrupt and he's lining his pockets, but at least he's hired good people and they're doing good things. But the wall-to-wall incompetence, the utter self-enrichment that is informing everyone, from Kristi Noem and her boyfriend Lewandowski, and the way that they are awarding these ICE contracts to what's happening at the FCC, to Bessent and his crew, the crypto billionaires who have moved in and are just beginning a process that makes Trump so much wealthier. As you've pointed out, he's now legitimately probably close to $5 billion, largely as a result of some of this stuff. So I want to go first to the FCC then, and this threat that was made openly on that Benny Johnson podcast, when he's basically threatening Sinclair and Nexstar stations with FCC pulling of licenses if they don't pull Kimmel. I mean, it was all clearly implied in that statement, wasn't it? It was Mobsterville.
Oh yeah, and this is an absolute example of the government violating the First Amendment. The government doesn't apply to your show. It doesn't apply to the First Amendment doesn't apply to your show. It is that Congress shall pass no law restricting. Well, that's been clearly interpreted, as it should be by the courts, to mean that the administration can't either, because after all, the executive under our Constitution is simply the water boy who carries out the directives of the Congress. And the FCC has been incredibly timid in the past about licenses. I got a whole broadcast chain forced to go out of business. They didn't technically lose their license. They got told instead of a normal 3-year renewal, you were going to get a short license, a 2-year renewal, which was a signal: sell your stations and go out of business so you don't have to go through the ignominy of having your license revoked. And that was for really serious, decades-long manipulation of the news for the personal, financial, and other benefits to the controlling owner of the chain called gross telecasting. Here, it's very plain that the message is you will only air that which the president approves, or we will come after you. And with Sinclair, I don't think that'll be a problem. These are the people who invented swift boating. They took a military tactic invented by Lieutenant, sorry, his name
It was in
just
the
went out
Kerry
of my-
thing. I don't know who the lieutenant's name is.
the Democratic Party candidate for president.
Kerry, wasn't it?
Kerry, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Lieutenant John Kerry, that saved, we don't know how many, but many, many American sailors' lives in the Vietnam War by creatively changing the direction and orders that he had, and turned him into, a sniveling coward who shot a little boy in the back. There's no regard for fact or truth at Sinclair. Those people are ideologues. And yet the FCC's never gone after them for their outrageous abuses. Now, you can't touch Fox and OAN and these others because they're on the internet, just like you are. But TV stations that broadcast over the public airwaves, you can go after them. In the case of the network, CBS, NBC, and ABC, they are not licensed, but their owned stations are O&O stations, KABC, KCBS, and KNBC in LA, for example. And this going after them and saying, you will only see what dear leader wants to show, is flat out unconstitutional. My guess of what will happen if this somehow gets into the courts, the Supreme Court will put it on what's called the shadow docket, the emergency docket, and they will say, well, we will let the litigation continue as to whether the administration improperly censored CBS, say, by taking away their television licenses. But in the meantime, those stations will remain off the air. And of course, that's not the way the court has ever worked. The irreparable harm theory in law is you got fired, you were blocked from doing something, you have a grant to do cancer research, you're a 4-year-old child who's getting treatment. We will leave you in place because if we take that away, you die, you lose your fortune, you lose your job, whatever. Through the shadow docket, they've completely turned that upside down. And that's just, I can't think of a milder word than despicable.
Well, it's so relevant, too, to the last 24 hours because the FTC firing was just upheld by the Supreme Court. And, of course,
And on those very grounds, you
Exactly.
can keep suing, but you're out of your job.
Sure. I mean, I didn't know about this irreparable harm law. That's why you're a law professor. But it's very relevant, as I say, and perfectly relevant to this administration. So we come back to Kimmel, which is just of a kind, because the statements on a broader level, as you know, by Trump, and we've detailed them and run them here, have been, there's been 97% negative coverage about me on the nightly news, which is, of course, just a ridiculous statistic that he just pulls out of whatever. And, what is negative coverage? I mean, anyway, in any case, and he's saying, I think we ought to look at those licenses as a result of that. I mean, he's realizing, you kind of said it, drunk with power, that he can put all of these stations on the griddle. And Nexstar, that wants to expand their footprint, they want to acquire more stations. They need FCC approval for that. Sinclair, as you say, they're already right-wing. They're happy to, sing through from that hymnal. So this is really a moment in time where he can leverage all of that.
And there's an economic component to this. The rule used to be that you could own 7 stations, 7 TV stations, 7 AM radio, 7 FM radio. We now have Clear Channel, I believe, at one point owned 800 radio stations. We have markets where there may be 16 stations, but like 14 of them are owned by the same company. And this is part of another long-term fundamental problem that has led to where Trump is. As you reduce competition, then you have fewer and fewer jobs that are in management and supervision and producing and serving customers or manufacturing goods. And that weakens the position of labor. It enhances the profits that go to the people at the top. And to the extent that these are profits that don't make market sense, they're what economists call by the stupid name rents. You know, we think of rent as that's what you pay for your apartment every month. But rents in this case means unearned profits, profits you shouldn't have. Those are also what's known as a deadweight loss to the economy. So if you have $1 billion of deadweight loss, the people who collect the $1 billion, they're better off. They got $1 billion. But to the rest of us, this didn't create more jobs. It didn't circulate money through the economy. It's as if we each took our share of the $1 billion and put a matchstick to dollar bills. The inability of Donald Trump to understand this, even though he was awarded an economics degree that he didn't earn by Penn, is at the heart of this. And this will continue to get worse. The threats to our national security, the murders Donald Trump has committed, we know 14 so far.
You're talking about Venezuela, is what you're talking about?
Yes, the 2 boats leaving Venezuela, 11 people on one and 3 on the other. And it's not me saying they're murders, it's former military lawyers saying across the board, there's no authority to do this. That's not how you do this. It's murder.
He was peacocking about that today, David, at the UN. Right. He says you won't, it was you won't see any more drug boats coming out of Venezuela. We took care of that.
And this will get worse until some of the Republicans find their spines. I mean, it is appalling that none of the Republicans will stand up to him because they're afraid they're going to be voted out of office. At some point, they're going to be voted out of office anyway, assuming we continue to have elections and they're not rigged. But, even Mitt Romney, proved to be mostly a rubber spine. He'd say things and he voted to convict on impeachment, knowing that Trump wouldn't be wouldn't be convicted upon impeachment the second time around. And it is, if you had written a novel in 2005 about what's going on in 2025, and it turned out to be exactly accurate, no one would have bought that novel. No one would have published it. It was beyond belief that we would see an entire political party's leadership ignore their oaths of office, ignore the principles they've stood by for years, and sign on to this racist, misogynist, fake Christian administration run by a career criminal.
Wow, that's so well said. I want to, because you do mention fake Christian, turn to the memorial service over the weekend. Yeah. I mean, the Charlie Kirk effect, the political animation of young people, Turning Point USA, I think had more to do with the victory that Trump had than did the Joe Rogan manosphere. Not saying the Joe Rogan manosphere wasn't part of it too in terms of getting word out, but really as a political organization, Turning Point USA was the real thing. Kirk, who I agreed with on almost nothing, but I certainly agreed with him on free speech. He was a big free speech proponent.
If he wasn't going to kill you over your speech.
Right, that's true. There is that, yeah. I mean, he really had said some things that really were, despicable. But again, his answer to it is more free speach, and certainly his violent end is horrifying and awful. It was a revival. It was the memorial service was like a religious revival, and it was filled with a political. It felt like a political convention as well, as you saw Trump get up there and make points. Miller, I thought, was even more caustic, wasn't he? I mean, and, Miller was just he was an
More
angry.
strident than I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot because he's about as strident as the word can be applied.
Yeah, we're not going to let them take your country from you. And them, it was as though this wasn't a crazy wacko who'd taken out Charlie Kirk. It was some normal liberal lefty who had taken him out. I mean, this is, you know, these people who assassinate political figures, they're crazy. They're crazy, radicalized people. They don't represent almost anybody. But I worry that rhetoric that I heard at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, some of that will animate that kind of call to arms, you know, David?
Well, that's exactly what they're doing. And there will be more acts of political violence. And of course, they're whitewashing everything they can, removing references to slavery from national parks and monuments and museums. They are trying in every way possible to create this us versus them mentality. And they're not a majority. They're not even close to a majority with this kind of belief system. A lot of people voted for Trump because they want tax cuts or they believe that he'll be tough on the border. They didn't sign up for the rest of this. So far this year, China, which typically buys 1 in 4 bushels of soybeans from the US, has ordered exactly 0 soybeans. And farmers are now saying, gee, we need a bailout. So remember, Trump is also, because he did this before in his first term, Trump is also a socialist, if that word, the way he throws it around, because you're not going to sell soybeans to China. I don't care. And now we'll tap you and I as taxpayers to make up for these farmers. And the farmers don't want to collect payments. They want to grow their crops and sell them. But because of the retaliatory tariff China put on, you hit us with all these tariffs, fine. We're going to hit you where it hurts. We have a selective tariff. We're going to hit your soybeans, just like the Canadians said, we're going to tariff Canadian Kentucky bourbon. You know, people are pushing back around the world about this. And people have got to stand up. Now, there's apparently a big rally, another No Kings rally, people trying to organize. If you can't get 20 million people to show up for this, there's probably no point in holding it. The crowd sizes have to be a lot larger. People have to decide, you know, this is more important than watching the Saturday afternoon football game, to go to this. And absolutely peacefully. They're going to try really hard to provoke people to create incidents, because that will help Trump, who wants to be able to declare martial law. And, you know, I don't know, almost 50 years ago, I broke the story that when Ronald Reagan was governor of California, the National Guard Training Center in San Luis Obispo was teaching California police officers how to impose martial law, but they weren't teaching how to return civilian control. And the answer I got to that was, oh, it was an oversight. It's an oversight. Yeah, right. But more importantly, years later, somebody else wrote a story and pointed out they'd never corrected the oversight. It has long been a dream on the right among some elements, the ones who are around Trump, the Charlie Kirk types, especially the Stephen Miller, Kash Patel types, to get rid of democracy. And Donald even said the other day, well, you know, a lot of people saying maybe we ought to have a dictator. That'd be a good idea. I don't know anybody is actually saying that in the public sphere. But of course, yeah. Donald, as you said, just pulls those things out of somewhere.
And he, you know, he states it over and over as he does these facts that are completely concocted. You know, on the Tylenol thing yesterday, he was talking about Cuba not being able to afford Tylenol. That's why and look at them, they have no autism. Look at the Amish community, they have no inoculations, and they don't use any medications, and as a result, there's no autism there. Of course, there is autism in the Amish community. Cuba can certainly afford Tylenol; they use it down there, and there's autism down there. And plus, the data, reams of it, decades of it, really speak against the notion that there's any link between Tylenol and autism. It's absurd.
Well, there's a guy I follow on Facebook called Dr. Knock, N-O-C. And he is a scientist, and he does a very good job in plain English of explaining things. And on the issue of the Tylenol and autism, he pointed out that they didn't even read the studies they cited because they say the exact opposite of what they say in one case. In another case, the N, that is the number of cases that were examined, was 9,000. There's another study where the N is 900,000 that shows no noticeable effect from Tylenol on pregnant women. Why would you cherry pick the one that says 1/100th of that number? Plus, the finding was, well, there might be just a minimal effect, but it's not statistically significant. This is just made up stuff. People are going to die if they don't get vaccines. And then Donald comes in and says over the weekend, well, you know, we've got to stop this having these multiple vaccines at one time. Mumps, measles, and rubella, MMR, is given at the same time in one shot. You know, I'm not a biologist, but I know that every day your body deals with thousands, probably tens of thousands of pathogens that get into the body, things that might be damaging, and it deals with all of them at the same time. And we know from decades of experience. I mean, I couldn't grow a beard when they started handing out MMR vaccines like that, to giving them to little kids. Your body could deal with a vaccine that has 40 different vaccines. Donald doesn't know anything.
Well, he gets fragments of information, and on the MMR thing, that was one of those things that was knocking around, that the MMR, putting them all together is bad. That's been knocking around for a long time. And
among people who have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly. And it's only because it was been repeated so long that there was this shadow around it, and now they do break them all out. So it's like, but they don't break them out for any scientific reason. They break them out because there was such public recoiling from the notion of them all together based on the propaganda that you're talking about. So,
and by the way, that further raises healthcare costs. And I'm in the process right now of signing up for my benefits from my employer, RIT, for the next year. And healthcare costs, Trump said they're all going to come down. Drug prices are going to go down 1,500%, which is a fabulously wild mathematical concept. Everything's going up a lot. Richard Eisenberg, the former editor of Money Magazine, says his Medicare Part D for drugs is gone up 8.5 times. Every dollar he pays this year, next year, he'll pay $8.50.
The last thing I want to ask you quickly is related to this that we're talking about, and that is, it struck me as he was speaking yesterday about this Tylenol thing, knowing that there are volumes of data that are clear about no link between Tylenol and autism, that there is a legal case here. I mean, you know, there are real damages here. Now, because of who Trump is and his disposition toward the way he's handling business, you saw the makers of Tylenol kind of walking very carefully in their response. But it strikes me that, you know, if they wanted to lawyer up and show real damages, they could.
I'm sure they could. Where they would have standing and who they could go against is not entirely clear.
I see.
What I'm sure they will do at some point is file to try and block the regulations. And if it isn't done by Johnson & Johnson, which produces Tylenol by and large, it will be some medical group, the College of American Pediatricians or somebody like that, to try and block these things. And again, I predict what will likely happen here is a trial court will say, yeah, you litigants are correct. The administration is wrong. An appeals court will hold it up. And the Supreme Court in the shadow docket will say, well, Trump's policy remains in place while the litigation goes by, turning the principle of irreparable harm on its head.
Yeah, and there you go. See the earlier point about the shadow docket. David, so appreciate your time. Thank you. I look forward to next week.
Thank you. Talk to you next week.
All right, David K. Johnston.
Don't lose faith.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.